The crazy thing was I had moved over when I was 18 to Canada, moved to Calgary. I lived with a friend of a friend of a friend on a mattress in his computer room. And it was so far south of Calgary that like it was almost not Calgary. So, I mean, beggars can't be choosers. I was 18. I just wanted to live this wrestling dream. And I moved out there, and then I went to wrestle at the Hart Dungeon. That was my initial plan. And the reason why I went there was because actually Lance was my favorite wrestler. So he was one of my favorites because I used to tape trade because we don't get much stuff here in Australia, obviously, especially back then. And I'd been watching ECW. I'd seen like Lance do a run-in on WCW, which we got at 3 a.m. in the morning here in Australia. So when I saw him, no one knew who he was. And because I knew and I wanted to be the cool kid, I'm like, I know that guy. That's my guy. That's Lance. And I just was like, yeah, I know everything about him. So he became my favorite. And I figured, well, I just want to follow in his footsteps, get trained at the dungeon, go to Japan, do all that stuff. And then when I went to Calgary at 18 to see the Hart family, it didn't work out. Let's say let's say that it didn't go to plan. It's been well documented. I got a lot of heat in my first year because of it. But Lance happened to open up a school because I didn't want to come home. So I got a visa. I got a job.
Wait. I don't know the story. Why'd you get heat?
Well, it's out there. So basically, I moved when I was 18. So I was doing a lot of youth work from 16 to 18 at this company called the Reach Foundation. So my mentor there pretty much pushed me and inspired me to go, don't go to university, go chase your dream of being a wrestler. You're passionate, go. So I contacted the Hearts at 16 and they were like, wait till you're 18, which I'm glad I did. So I did. I got my first job, saved enough money, did a fundraiser and moved to Calgary like at 18. Not knowing anything about the world. My parents are Filipino, so you can imagine the shock when I wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer. So I moved over to Calgary and met up with the Harts. Well, I met up with Bruce. So I met up with Bruce Hart at a wing house that Natty Neidhart worked at. So Natalia was working there at the time as a waitress, and she served us, and he ordered like a mountain of wings. I've never seen that many wings in my life. We don't do bulk here. And I was like, man, and he just started telling me all this stuff. So I'm like, this sounds good. Like, this sounds promising. And then 4 weeks later, I hadn't heard anything about training. At this point, I already have a visa. I'm working at Build-A-Bear Workshop as my first gig over there. And then I already had a job, had a place to stay, and it'd been 4 weeks, and I went to a Stampede show, and all the phone calls were like, have you spoken to Bruce? Bruce wants to talk to you. Have you spoken to Ross? And it was like back and forth for 4 weeks. Then I stayed at 2 a.m. at a Stampede show and waited and spoke to, I can't remember which one it was. I spoke to one of the Hearts. And they pretty much told me some really bad stuff. Like, essentially, it was like, we have no school. We just sold the Hart house, but we can train you in the grass for $5,000. And I was like, oh, man. Nah, I'm okay. And then they said a couple other things, and I was like, so I remember going home. Yo, it gets better. I remember going home. My roommate picked me up, and I was depressed. Clearly, I'd lived my whole life at 18. And I've been in a youth work organization. So I'm like, everyone's super happy and everything's positive. So this was like my first, I haven't had real death in my family. I've been quite lucky. I've had adversity, but this was like the first, hey, buddy, you know your dreams? Don't worry about it because you're a dickhead. There's no point. Like, that's what it felt. So I was like, well, my roommate takes me to Denny's, and I'm eating like this sundae depressed, and he's like telling me it's going to be okay. And I'm like, please don't talk to me right now because you don't know what I'm feeling. I'm 18 and I'm young, and I think no one understands me because I have teenage angst. So I go home to email my partner at the time, and she wanted to stay together while I was away for the year. And
nice.
I checked my email to send her this big, long, heartbroken email, but she already emailed me. So I was like, oh, sweet, open it. Turns out she wanted to confess that she had cheated on me at a formal and then conceded, put the lyrics to Goodbye, My Lover. Right after. So to this day, that song, it gives me like weird feelings. But so that was my first experience in Calgary. And I was like, look, I can't go home. I've spoken to like thousands of kids on end about living your dream and chasing it and facing adversity. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay and work at a teddy bear workshop, right? Use my accent as much as I can and try to survive out here at $7.49 an hour. And I was just very lucky that Lance had retired. He'd left. He was doing indie work and he wasn't doing stuff at developmental. And he decided to open up his own school. And I, being the excited boy that I was, put $500 like check in an express post. I think I paid like $30 to express post it to his like PO box to hopefully be in his class. And then I got a letter back probably within 2 weeks. And I remember holding it up to the light and I looked through it and I could see my check and I was like, I didn't get in, but it was actually the receipt. So I was all right. And he sent me like a handwritten letter telling me that in his obviously biased opinion that I'm better off with him. And that he was going to take care of me. And then the crazy thing was, which he still thinks is funny to this day, I lived around a corner from his house because Lance also doesn't like people too much. So he lives very far south of Calgary. And he said, I can pick you up every day on the way to class because you're literally around the corner from my house. So he would pick me up and take me to class. And he also laughed that the PO box that I express post my mail to is literally across the road from me, which is his PO box. So I paid $40 for a dude to literally take it and put it where I could have put it. So he still thinks that's hilarious.
If that ain't the wrestling business, I don't know what is.
I know, man.
Right? That's my start. That's Lance says you have a story before you even started. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm made for this business then, right?